Everybody like and subscribe, praise the bell icon. Story number 1.
In the summer of 2017, a small family-owned water park on the outskirts of a quiet Midwestern town became the scene of something so strange and unsettling. It was quietly shut down without a word to the public. The water park, Blue Falls Adventure Cove, had been operating for years, known for its rickety slides, sun-bleached umbrellas, and the deep, murky wave pool that locals joked was bottomless. Most of those jokes stopped after what happened to a group of teenagers on a late July afternoon. There were 5 of them: Mia, Jordan, Caleb, Lauren, and Ty. Friends since middle school, they'd grown up going to Blue Falls every summer. That year, as a final hurrah before college, they visited one last time. The day had been blistering hot, and the park was strangely underattended, almost eerily so. Some of the attractions were shut down. Signs read, "Closed for maintenance," but there were no workers in sight. In fact, apart from a few families and the silent teenage lifeguards, it felt like they were nearly alone. Around 3 p.m., they wandered over to the wave pool. The sun had ducked behind thick clouds, casting the water in a grayish hue. The pool was known for being unusually deep in the center, well beyond the norm, and the waves came in long, irregular bursts. Rumors had swirled for years that someone had drowned there, though nothing had ever been officially confirmed. They swam out to the middle, daring each other to touch the drain at the very bottom. It was a dumb challenge, but something they'd done since they were kids. Ty was the first to dive, vanishing under the surface. 10 seconds passed. Then 20, then 30. When he broke through the surface, his face was pale, his expression off. He was trembling. But when they asked what happened, he just said, "I didn't make it all the way down. It's deeper than before." Caleb went next and resurfaced almost immediately. "It's freezing down there," he said, "like ice cold. Doesn't make sense in this heat." Lauren didn't want to go in. She said she'd had a weird dream the night before about someone grabbing her leg in the water. Mia laughed it off, calling her superstitious, but Lauren refused. So Mia dove under, determined to prove nothing was wrong. She was down for a while, longer than Ty or Caleb. When she came back up, her eyes were wide with panic. She whispered, "Someone's down there." They thought she was joking, but then she started crying, saying she saw a hand reaching up from the drain, slow and white and moving unnaturally. They swam back to the edge fast, yelling for the lifeguard. But the teenage guard just stared at them. He didn't move, didn't even blink. That's when Ty noticed something. The guard's radio was emitting static, loud and angry, even though he hadn't touched it. The sound grew so loud it echoed off the concrete. Then the waves started. Not the usual fun, bouncing ones, but violent, disorienting surges that knocked them off their feet. Lauren screamed as something brushed against her leg. She swore it felt like fingers wrapping around her ankle. When she reached the ladder, she clawed at the metal so hard her fingernails bled. They scrambled out of the pool just as a long, strange ripple moved through the water, like something massive had just passed underneath. Park staff showed up a minute later, clearly panicked. Without explanation, they evacuated the pool, ushered everyone toward the exits, and locked the gates behind them. The group tried asking what had happened, but the staff wouldn't say a word. One of the older employees just whispered, "That pool should have been closed years ago. It doesn't want to stay empty." A week later, Blue Falls shut down permanently. No announcement, no news coverage, just gone. Ty never spoke about that day again. Mia transferred schools and wouldn't answer any texts from the group. Caleb claimed he started seeing things in reflective surfaces, figures in the bathtub, in puddles, even in the mirror. Lauren had it the worst. 3 months later, she drowned in a hotel hot tub. No drugs, no alcohol, just slipped under and never came back up. The drain had been shut tight. Jordan, the one who told the story, moved across the country and never swam again. He said sometimes he still hears the sound of static when he closes his eyes. And once, just once, he heard water sloshing under his bed. When he looked beneath it, the carpet was wet and the air smelled like chlorine. They say some places take things from you, but that pool gives something back. And whatever it is, it follows you.
Story number 2.
One summer, a group of friends decided to spend the day at an old water park that had been reopened after years of closure. The place was already crawling with a creepy vibe. The paint peeling off the slides, the pools that looked murky even though they were supposed to be cleaned, and the eerie silence in parts where the music speakers barely worked. But it was the thrill of the forbidden that drew them in. They arrived just as the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the cracked pavement. The water park was nearly empty except for a handful of other visitors, mostly families with young kids. But as the night crept in, most people started leaving, and the friends found themselves with more and more of the park to themselves. They decided to check out the most infamous attraction, the Abyss. It was a massive enclosed water slide, dark inside, rumored to have been closed for years due to some strange accidents. The staff said it was under maintenance, but no one really knew why. Ignoring the warnings, the group squeezed into the narrow entrance. The slide twisted and turned in total darkness. The only sound was water rushing past them and their own muffled screams. Suddenly, the slide jolted sharply, and one of them, Jess, was knocked sideways against the wall. She gasped, then fell silent. When the others looked back, they realized she was gone. The slide continued without her, as if she'd been swallowed whole. They reached the bottom, landing in the pool, hearts pounding. They called out for Jess, but only silence answered. They rushed back up to the entrance, but it was blocked, locked tight from the outside. Panicking, they looked around for help, but found no one. The park was deserted, save for the faint sound of dripping water echoing from the slide's dark interior. Hours passed. They tried every exit and door, but found them all locked. The power flickered, and the water park speakers crackled to life, broadcasting a chilling, distorted voice that whispered their names one by one. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally along the walls, and the pools began to ripple even though there was no breeze. Suddenly, Jess appeared at the far end of the park, soaked and pale, but her eyes were blank, void of recognition. When they reached her, she whispered, "Don't trust the water. It watches." Terrified, they realized the water wasn't just water. It seemed alive, watching them, waiting. Each pool reflected something dark beneath its surface. One by one, the friends felt drawn to the water's edge, compelled to look deeper, until they too began to fade away, swallowed by the endless blackness beneath the surface. The next morning, the park was quiet again. Staff found the gates wide open, but no sign of the friends. Only their wet footprints leading to the abandoned slide, disappearing into the water below. The water park closed once again. Locals say if you listen closely on quiet nights, you can hear the splash of unseen bodies hitting the water and the faint whisper of warnings that nobody dares to heed.
Story number 3.
A group of high school seniors decided to visit a long-abandoned water park on the outskirts of town as part of a dare. It was called Cascade Falls, once a popular family attraction in the 80s, but it had been shut down decades earlier after a string of strange accidents, drownings, broken bones, a girl who vanished from the lazy river and was never found. It was all chalked up to poor maintenance and bad luck, but people in the area whispered about something darker. The night they went, the air was thick and still. Trees had grown over the crumbling parking lot, and the entrance gate hung crooked on rusted hinges. They hopped the fence with flashlights and phones, their laughter echoing through the silent grounds. The park was frozen in time, slides tangled with vines, waterless pools now filled with trash and animal bones. But there was one area that seemed untouched, the Black Vortex, a huge enclosed water slide notorious for its speed and pitch-black descent. As they approached, the air grew noticeably colder. The metal stairs leading to the top of the slide were still intact, though slick with grime. One of the guys, Aaron, dared the others, "Who's going down first?" They joked nervously, but eventually his girlfriend Lily agreed. "I'll do it. You guys are so dramatic." She sat at the mouth of the slide, her phone flashlight aimed down the dark tube. It reflected off the smooth plastic for only a second before being swallowed by darkness. Then she pushed off. They waited at the bottom. A minute passed, then 2. No splash, no scream, no sign of her. Aaron climbed up and looked inside, shouting her name, his voice echoing weirdly, as if the tunnel were deeper than it should be. He slid down after her without hesitation. The others stood in silence, listening. Then they heard it. From inside the slide, a low, wet slapping noise, followed by a scream. Not Aaron's. Not Lily's. Something else. It sounded like dozens of voices wailing all at once, a shrill blend of panic and rage that made their skin crawl. One of the others, Jess, ran to call the police, but there was no signal. The rest hesitated. Finally, one of the boys, Tyler, decided to go in after them, insisting it was probably a prank or a twisted scare attempt. He took his phone, turned on the flashlight, and slid in. He never came out either. Now completely panicked, the remaining two, Jess and Marcus, ran to the park exit, screaming for help. As they reached the front gate, they saw the old park security shack's lights flicker on. There hadn't been electricity in the park for decades. A figure stood in the window, pale, hair matted, eyes black as oil. It smiled and lifted a walkie-talkie to its mouth. All riders from the Black Vortex have been received, it said, voice crackling with static. Send more. The lights blinked out. Jess turned to run, but Marcus was gone. No scream, no sound, just gone. Like he had been snatched out of existence. Jess ran until she hit the road, where she flagged down a passing car. The driver didn't believe her, thought she was high or in shock. The police returned to the park with her in daylight. The slides were collapsed and broken, the stairs rusted through, the Black Vortex sealed off entirely with concrete. No sign of entry. No phones, no footprints, nothing. It was like no one had been there in years. But later that night, Jess got a video message from Aaron's number. It was a blurry clip, only a few seconds long. It showed the inside of the slide, lit briefly by a phone's flashlight, and behind the light dozens of pale faces pressed against the plastic, their mouths open wide in silent screams. Then it went black. The phone number stopped working after that. Jess never went near a water park again, and every summer since, around the anniversary of that night, someone in town gets a video like hers from a number that doesn't exist, showing the inside of the Black Vortex with more faces, new ones.